Hi friends, this is Surojit Ray here. Today I shall be speaking about the Vedas. A lot of us would have heard this term before, and many of us may also know that there are four Vedas in Hindu mythology: the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sam Veda, and the Atharva Veda. But unfortunately, for most of us, our knowledge about the Vedas ends there. Let's quickly try and look at the origin of the Vedas first before getting into the other specifics. So, in terms of origin, if you go back and Google or search for historical evidence available around the same, you would realize that officially the Vedas were documented in 5000 BC, close to 5000 BC. So, technically speaking, the documented version of the four Vedas is 7000 years old. But there is a story behind this story as well. Can we assume the date of documentation as the date of creation of the Vedas? To me and my research, the answer is no. There is a parallel thought process behind how the Vedas came into existence. Who wrote them? Who created them? So, well, if I have to answer the question as to who documented the Vedas around 5000 BC, the credit for the same goes to Vedas, the same person who compiled the Mahabharata as well. Vedas has, to his credit, the compilation of three great documents in Hindu mythology. The first one being Mahabharata, second one being the four Vedas, and the third one being the Puranas. This is the chronology in which we know him as having documented these scriptures or these books or these epics. But so to say, the Vedas is the largest chunk he has documented, then comes the Puranas, and lastly the Mahabharata. Now, having said that, was he the creator of the Vedas? The answer is no. Vedas has always been a compiler. He has compiled the Mahabharata. Mahabharata was an epic which presumably happened on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and Vedas only wrote the story thereafter, explaining it to the world, taking it to the world. So he was not the creator of Mahabharata, he was the compiler of Mahabharata. Likewise, Vedas is also the compiler of the Vedas and the Puranas. The origin of the Vedas dates back to origination of mankind, when the first human being was born on earth. In Hindu mythology, Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh are known as the three famous gods. We call them as the Trinity of Hinduism. Brahma is considered to be the creator, Vishnu is considered to be the sustainer, and Mahesh or Shiva, he is considered to be the balancer. So Brahma is the true originator or the creator of the Vedas if one peeps deeper into history and mythology. It is believed in Hinduism that Brahma created 7 sages from his womb. So these 7 sages did not have a biological birth, normal process of biological birth. They were created from the womb of Brahma, and these 7 sages were given the responsibility of creating mankind on earth. So they were the first 7 people to come on earth. Christianity believes it was Adam and Eve. Hinduism believes these 7 sages came on earth to create mankind. In fact, there is also a conflict or a controversy behind, was it 7 or was it 8? Some say it's 8, some say it's 7. The 8th Rishi under consideration is Agastya Rishi. So some believe it was 8 including Agastya Rishi, and some believe it was 7 minus Agastya Rishi. These 7 sages, technically these 7 sages were brothers of each other because they came from the same mother, which is Lord Brahma. So while they are brothers of each other, they led to creation of mankind on earth. So, and we all of us are lineal descendants of these 7 sages. Our original forefather is one of these 7 sages. So looked at from a larger perspective, because these 7 sages were brothers, all their lineal descendants would be either real brothers and sisters of each other, or they would be cousins of each other. So in that sense, every person living on earth today, we are related to each other because we are all origins of these 7 sages. So when these 7 sages or 8 sages, as one may say, were brought on earth by Brahma, Brahma also spelled out the Vedas in their ears. Brahma specifically instructed them that these shlokas of the Vedas, these verses of the Vedas, which he is spelling out into their ears, they should never document it, never put it in writing. They are supposed to pass it on to their future generations in the same format. They shall be speaking and the future generation shall be learning it from them. So it was supposed to be passed on from one generation to another through the Shruti principle. Shruti principle means listening. You listen and master something. You are not supposed to document it. So these sages, they were gifted, they were blessed because they were creations of Brahma. They very easily by-hearted all these verses of the Vedas, and they were large number of verses. If history were to be believed, mythology were to be believed, there were close to 1,75,000 verses in the Vedas as originally spelled out by Brahma to these 7 sages. And Brahma never called them as 4 different Vedas. They were just a list of 1,75,000 verses spelled out. And the sages started passing it on to their future generations through the Shruti principle. Unfortunately, generation over generation, these shlokas started losing their relevance. What began as 1,75,000 shlokas in generation 1, now the number started depleting drastically generation after generation. Whenever there was a pass on from one generation to another, we know the famous game of Chinese whispers. Something similar happened over here. When the data was being moved over from one generation to another, some of the shlokas got conveniently forgotten. Some of the shlokas, the words got manipulated. So every pass from one generation to another was resulting in depletion of a sizable chunk of the original spelled out shlokas. Over a few generations, Brahma realized that what began as 1,75,000 odd shlokas had now got reduced to roughly 50 to 55,000 shlokas. Brahma now feared that if this continued in future, very soon the Vedas would be extinct. And that's where he got hold of Vedas, the famous compiler in Hindu mythology, and requested Vedas to go to the ashrams of all the lineal descendants of all these 7 sages and pull out whatever shlokas were left with them, pull it out from them and gather it in a compilation. That's where Vedas took up the onus of visiting the ashramas of all these lineal descendants of those learned sages and compiling the Vedas. But when he sat and compiled them, he realized what he was left with was just about barely 50 to 52,000 shlokas. And that is what then constituted the 4 Vedas. He decided to divide it into 4 books or 4 Vedas, and that is the official documentation of the Vedas, which dates back 7,000 years. This was just before the start of the Vedic period. In fact, the Vedas gained a lot of significance in the Vedic period, where they were considered as the basis of life. The Vedas were revered, respected, and followed during the Vedic culture of Hinduism. So the Vedas gained prominence during that period. If I look back now in history to summarize, the Vedas originated with the origination of man. They continued in verbal format for several thousands of years. Finally, about 7,000 years back, Vedas compiled it in writing, and that is the official documentation which then happened. Since then, we have it in written format. Now comes the language of the Vedas. The Vedas are believed to have been written in ancient Vedic Sanskrit language. The language is in verses. There are totally about 50 to 55,000 shlokas which Vedas could compile in the 4 Vedas, and what we now have is just 1/3, less than 1/3 of what was originally propounded by Brahma, which was 1,75,000 odd shlokas. So unfortunately, what we are left with today is only less than 1/3 of the knowledge which he had passed on. The next question is, what do these verses of the Vedas indicate? Well, it is believed that the Vedas are the basis of life on earth. When Brahma, the creator, created the universe and created life on earth, the planet called earth, he also wanted to give a handbook or a rule book of everything that was, that is, and that shall exist on earth, with a view to guide people, guide the inhabitants of this planet called earth. The Lord Brahma had kind of dictated the Vedas to the 7 sages. It was like a rule book or a handbook which would define everything that existed on earth or would exist in future on earth. So that was the logic or the basis behind Brahma narrating those 1,75,000 odd shlokas to the rishis. The language used is Vedic Sanskrit. It is in verses. And there is also a misconception about the Vedas, that the knowledge in the Vedas is to do with spirituality or to do with mythology or to do with religion. In fact, there is no reference of any religion in the Vedas. The Vedas came in at a time before religions could exist, because it came in when mankind was created on earth. So number one, there is no reference of religion, of Hinduism or Buddhism or Jainism or any other religion in the Vedas. It is not religion centric, it is thought centric. That's number one. Second, the base thought is not spiritual, the base thought is science. I once again go back to the thought process behind creating the Vedas. Lord Brahma created the Vedas because he wanted to give a handbook for survival to the world. So the Vedas talks about science. It's just that the language used in the Vedas is in the way the Vedas, the shlokas have been written, is in a language which could be understood by people then. If Lord Brahma had to explain carbon dioxide and oxygen to people way back when mankind was created, it would have been impossible for him to do so, because nobody knew what is oxygen and carbon dioxide then. So quite obvious, he had to use a language which could be understood by people of that particular generation. Hence, the language of the Vedas is very basic. It is more of a riddle format, and also Lord Brahma has used fear element in the Vedas. Basically, if you want to make people follow something, there are 2 ways to do it. Either you explain it to them and leave it to them, or you put fear in their mind and make them follow the same. In those days, explaining the scientific concepts was impossible for Brahma, so that's where he started. The way he structured the Vedas was that every ritual or every aspect mentioned in the Vedas was connected with a particular practice, and there was a fear element inserted that if you don't follow this practice, something bad will happen with you. I'll give you a faint example, a small example of how science came into being through the Vedas. Of course, the whole science that we know today has originated from the Vedas. If you look at all learned scientists across the world, including a lot of them like Albert Einstein, for example, Niels Bohr, or for that matter even Nikola Tesla, all of them have openly admitted that they were regular followers of the Vedas and they have taken a lot of inspiration from the Vedas. I remember a famous statement of Albert Einstein to Rabindranath Tagore when Albert Einstein visited India and met Rabindranath Tagore. He said, "I owe all my success to your forefathers." This was a small statement, but it spelled out a million messages. Similarly, if you look at Jagdish Chandra Bose, for example, learned Indian scientist who proved that plants have life, what he proved was written in the Vedas 7,000 years back by Vedas. The Vedas always claim that plants have life, and if you do a little bit of peeping into history and try and understand Jagdish Chandra Bose's background, Jagdish Chandra Bose's grandfather was an expert proponent of the Vedas. So he had just picked this up from the Vedas. The Vedas had clearly spelled out that plants have life. He knew this. He had to just conduct some experiments in a closed room and prove that plants have life. So a lot of inspiration by scientists, modern day scientists as also old scientists, has been the Vedas. They have openly admitted it, and Vedas is full of science. The basis of science, the Vedas has talked about nuclear energy, it has talked about Paramanu, which means atom. It has talked about energy being the base of everything. It's talked about the Big Bang theory. Everything that we know in astronomy today comes out of the Vedas. The Vedas have spelled out about the distance between the sun and the earth and the moon and the sun. The Vedas have talked about Navagraha. What is Navagraha? 9 planets. 9 planets of the solar system. Do you think Vedas had a telescope in his hands when he said that there are Navagrahas or 9 planets in the solar system? Of course, there was no telescope 7,000 years back. So, the short point I am trying to make is everything in science that has been, that is, and that shall be have all found their reference in the Vedas. Just that the language used in the Vedas was very, very primitive, was very basic, because it was written at a point of time when mankind did not understand science. So to make people follow science, Brahma rather created rituals as opposed to explaining the process behind the asking people to follow something. I'll give you a small example of how this works. If you are a Hindu, you would know this, that the peepal tree is considered as very auspicious in Hinduism. Most of our rituals in Hinduism which has to do with a tree is centric around the peepal tree. We have been asked never to harm the peepal tree, and it is told that God rests in the peepal tree, hence you are not supposed to touch the peepal tree. Now if you look at the peepal tree per se, it's an absolutely useless tree, so to say. The leaves of the tree are of no use, the tree is not fruit bearing, the wood of the tree is so very soft that it can't even be used for burning. So in a nutshell, the peepal tree is an absolute weed. There is no use of that tree to mankind. But still, the peepal tree has been revered in Hinduism. In fact, if you go across the globe, today you will find peepal tree only in 2 countries. You will find it in India and you will find it in Sri Lanka. You will find it nowhere else. Everywhere else that tree has been cut and destroyed, and it is down and under. It has been eradicated completely because it was of no use. But in India and Sri Lanka, you still find the peepal tree, and in abundance. So much so that we worship that particular tree. Why are we worshipping that particular tree? Not because God rests in that particular tree, but because peepal is one of those rare trees, rare species of plants which can do photosynthesis virtually 24 hours a day. We all know science today. We know when photosynthesis happens, plants consume carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. So every peepal tree virtually is an oxygen machine. It gives you oxygen 24 hours a day. And thanks to the Vedas, today we have kept the peepal tree alive, which is one of those few species of plants on earth which can give out oxygen, belch out oxygen virtually 24 hours a day. So the underlying was science, but it was explained in a manner that would create fear in the minds of people, so that because of that fear, people would follow that particular principle. So the principle was scientific, but the methodology of explaining it was primitive. So that is the only shortcoming of the Vedas. The last thing that I want to quickly touch upon are the parts of the Vedas. Every Veda has been divided into 4 parts. Those 4 parts are Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. The Samhitas give us the verses, the bare verses which Brahma wanted to give to mankind through the Vedas. So the Brahmanas, the Samhitas portion is only about the verses. The Brahmanas are commentaries on those verses, explanations of those verses. The Aranyakas talk about rituals centric around those verses and other ancillary texts supporting the verses. And last but not the least is the Upanishads. The Upanishads is where knowledge about spirituality, connect with inner self and connect with God actually exists. If I go back to the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita has explained to Arjuna that the first 3 parts of the Vedas, which is the Samhitas, the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas, constitutes Karma Kand. He has defined them as Karma Kand. And he's called the Upanishads portion of the Vedas as Gyan Kand. Now what does he mean by Karma Kand and Gyan Kand? He had a beautiful explanation around the Karma Kand and the Gyan Kand. He explained to Arjuna that the Karma Kand has been carved out by Brahma in the Vedas for the material man. it talks about materiality, material happiness, material joy, wealth, etc. So the first three parts of the Brahmanas, the Samhitas, the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas of the Vedas give you rituals, mantras and benefits out of those rituals. Net they are talking about increasing your wealth, increasing your material happiness and mental happiness. So those are the karma kand, as the name suggests, is meant for sansaric human beings, people who are in the lust for more materiality in their life. And the Gyan Kand or the Upanishads are pure knowledge that talks about proximity to God, about meditation, about understanding the inner self, connecting with your inner self, connecting with the Paramatma within. And his explanation to Arjuna was, till a person is a follower of the Karma Kand, he will never be close to God. He will never be able to follow the Gyan Kand. And once the person has given up on his Karma Kand, that's where he will start following Gyan Kand. So Karma Kand and Gyan Kand, they are polar opposites of each other. You can't follow the both of them together. In fact, that is the reason why, if you go back to the Vedic culture in Hinduism, a person was supposed to lead his normal life till a particular age. He was first supposed to follow brahmacharya till a particular age, then he would follow his married life and complete his responsibilities towards his family. Once his family was set, his children had grown up, the last stage of his life, he was supposed to renounce his family, go to the jungle, give up all his material belongings, go to the jungle, stay in the jungle, building a small kutir for himself, and devote all his time to increasing his proximity with God. The Vedic philosophy asked us to spend the last few years of our life in the Gyan Kand. That's the precise reason. As long as you are materially connected to bondings, you will never be able to increase your proximity with God. The day you cut your material strings, that's the day you have taken that first stride from your side towards understanding your inner self and understanding your God. And that's the precise reason why Hinduism also talks about surrendering your material life if you want to become a monk. So this is a very interesting take on the Vedas as propounded in the Bhagavad Gita, that as long as you are a follower of Karma Kand, the Samhitas, the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas, you can never be a follower of the Upanishads and vice versa. And if you look at the deeper meaning of all of this, our ultimate goal of life is to grow. And growth doesn't mean material or monetary growth, because what you grow materially or monetarily all your life is going to stay back on this earth once your Jivatma departs after your death. It's not going to go with you. What is going to go with you is your karmas and your spiritual enlightenment. The spiritual enlightenment comes to you only when you follow the Upanishads, only when you increase your proximity with God. So what we are striving for today, if you look at it very realistically, this is the core of this video, this is the core message of this video. The wealth we are running after, yes, it's important for us to survive. Without wealth, we will be on the road, we will have no food to eat. But there has to be an end to everything. The wealth we are earning is only helping us survive for today, this journey of this particular birth. It's not a permanent asset that we are building. We also need to build a permanent asset in the form of spiritual enlightenment. It's like living on rent versus owning a house. When you live on rent, what you pay as rent gives you the house for those 30 days for which you have paid the rent. But when you buy a house, take a loan and pay a bank installment for that particular house, every money that you are paying, every rupee that you are paying is helping you build that particular asset, and that asset shall permanently stay with you. The rent is not building you an asset, it's only giving you the ability to stay in that house for a specific period. So the Upanishads typically mean building the investment, making your house by taking a bank loan and paying the bank loan. The Karma Kand represents living on rent. The materiality in life represents living on rent. It's important for us to draw that right balance and also devote some of our life to ensuring that we are following the Gyan Kand of the Vedas. So that's my take on the Vedas. Very interesting. It's a beautiful book to go through, read for people who are interested on the subject matter. There are a lot of translations of the Vedas which are now available on the internet. I would urge each one of you to buy those books and spend time reading through some of them whenever you have leisure. Thank you so much for listening to this video. May God bless you and may you have a wonderful life ahead. Yes, as I leave, please don't forget to click on the like button below this video. Please leave a comment. Also, if you have liked this video, please click the subscribe button if you have not yet subscribed to my channel, and also click the bell icon below this video so that you can receive future notifications from my channel. Thank you so much. God bless.